Welcome back, Poggers, to another episode of the Pog State. I'm Atlas. I'm, of course, joined by the Valdanalist and Wolf here to help us break down the Play-Ins. Unfortunately, Chronicler couldn't be here because he's on the other side of the planet. He will be calling in, though, every now and again. We don't have a teddy bear for him. Why didn't we get a teddy bear for him?
I don't know.
He's not as cool as you.
Might be it. Also,
Yeah.
he did badmouth the MSI champions on broadcast, so maybe he's in the naughty
Punishment, yeah. He's in purgatory already at the LCS studio, so.
corner. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, so, gentlemen, play-ins almost have concluded. At the time of this recording, we are yet to see a couple of the best of fives, but I think we kind of know what's going to happen here.
Yeah.
Mad Lions did manage to take down Saigon Buffalo earlier today in our current time right now, and DFM just came off a victory over Loud. And I don't think anyone's surprised by any of these results, and when DFM lose to RNG tomorrow, we're also not going to be surprised about that. EG versus Mad? Wolf? Is that just Mad?
I think it's just Mad. I think Mad has actually looked much stronger than most of the teams on the other side of play-ins. So I think it's going to be pretty cut and dry, those final best of fives.
They've also now played a best of five, so
Yeah.
that's
They got that out of their system
they
before they
certainly
hit
did.
EG.
No one can say anything anymore.
No more memes, no more stuff like that. Yeah, I kind of agree with Wolf. Like, Group B was much stronger. So, Mad, I think they're just going to probably roll over, maybe like a 3-1. I think EG, like Saigon Buffalo won with Vayne top against Mad. So, anything is possible. Maybe that means that EG gets an extra game, but should be a pretty solid win for Mad, you would think.
Yeah, I'm just sad that there's probably not going to be as much more Zach mid going further into the tournament.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe we'll see some more experimentation. Maybe Faker heard Quickshot bad-mouthing him about his Zach mid that failed to win until Froggy took over. A very, very weird statistic is the fact that Faker has played Zach mid in a game he was not exactly trying his hardest in. Anyway, let's talk about DRX just momentarily, gentlemen, because I think they surprised all three of us. I thought that there was going to be, difficulty for them to get out of the group, perhaps.
I
but
thought
they just smashed it.
I thought there were two big things that really surprised me from out of the gates. First of all was Pioshik being the starting jungler and performing pretty well, especially in that first match against RNG. And the second thing that surprised me was that DRX seemed to have a pretty good read on the meta, despite having, obviously, of the LCK teams, the least amount of time to prepare before they're playing official matches. And also, they were the team that had to play the longest on previous patches. Obviously, they were playing in play-ins, or not play-ins, Worlds qualifiers here in Korea. So they were playing a ton, and so they were not able to practice very much, obviously just like everyone else in play-ins, but still had a pretty good read on the meta, arguably the best out of both groups. And they showed a lot of versatile drafting, and Kingan's playing decently well. And the things that we're worried about Pioshik, will Kingan perform? You're not worried about Deft. You're not really worried about Zeka, especially in this meta.
Especially now.
And DRX look really strong. I think the consistency we'll see. It was easier opponents, obviously, than what they will have to face in groups, but it's looking pretty good right now. I'm pretty optimistic.
Yeah, I mostly agree. I would like to say as well, just to build upon that, like in my mind, I was actually very sure that DRX would make it at least first or second in the group. Obviously, we didn't really expect them to beat RNG, but it was a best of one, and I think RNG's been sleepy the entire play-ins. So I think DRX caught them off guard. DRX were very well prepared. Like Wolf was saying, they caught them early because that was one of their first best of ones. So DRX got in early. They got that hard matchup out of the way. And the other thing is that I think right now LCK and LPL are like very far ahead, like miles ahead of the other regions, especially like Mad Lions, even at the 4th seed of LEC. Like, I think that DRX and RNG should be very highly ranked. Now, DRX did look a little bit rough in the LCK. Coming into this one, that was something that was quoted many times on the desk over there in the LCS studio. Yeah. Just talking about how, like, we're not really sure how this team is going to do. Like, they didn't look that good. Like, how are they going to do? But in my mind, I was just like, no. Like, they didn't look that good against really actually strong teams at the LCK. Like, they had some really strong opponents here, like Live Sandbox especially, and they were able to push through. So in my mind, I'm like, LCK really far ahead of LEC right now. I think they're going to at least get through in second. So nice surprise that they get through in first, but not too surprised for me that they did get out at least and had a strong performance in play-ins for now.
Yeah, and I'm actually, I agree with you. I think that DRX could be 4-1. I think it's, if RNG had have turned up and actually drafted something that had the potential to win the game, that would have been really, really good. The Neela composition into a Tristana face-up was just a really odd choice. And I think DRX, as you mentioned, like their preparation and their drafting outside of the Mad game, that one made me very upset. Because drafting 3 losing lanes is very disrespectful, and boys, you've just got to not do that. And then they went ahead and lost the early game horrendously, and then still managed to win, which was, a little bit sad, because that made it look like DRX were not that great. And yes, Zeka was an absolute hero in that one, but that's not how you set yourself up for success. And if they draft like that against anyone in their group, literally anyone, then they will just get completely clobbered.
That's the ones.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about group stage.
Yeah, sorry, group stage.
Like,
So I'm talking about GAM Esports, Top Esports, and Rogue, and those teams should be able to take advantage.
But even
Rogue's a difficult.
even anyone in play-ins, they could have caught them off guard if they.
Yeah, I mean, Mad basically did.
Yeah, they did. DRX were good enough to pull it through. I think Mad made that one mistake.
The
towards
Baron call, yeah.
Which happens. That even happens in the LCK as well. So DRX got a little bit lucky with that one, but they almost got BO1'd by the good old Mad Lions.
I think Mad Lions, similar to my expectations for DRX being really exceeded quite significantly. I think Mad Lions actually showed up and did way better in this group than I thought they would. Going into this group, I thought they might even be behind Saigon Buffalo. I thought this team looked very weak in the LEC, but they prepared well. I think Niski's having a good tournament so far. So Mad Lions, props to them. I just want to give them a shout out because I think that they did play well against DRX. They did punish DRX strategically really well with good macro in that game that they almost beat DRX in. Weren't able to do it in the end, but I think DRX made some mistakes in that game, and Pioshik missed a few critical ults and losing lanes, as you mentioned, Atlas. But Mad Lions looking okay, so I don't feel that bad about almost losing to them because they look to be better than I expected.
Chronicler, now to you. Which side are you on? You're somewhere. Anyway, sir, if you could just let us know how proud you are to be an LCK representative over in North America. I don't think we necessarily need to ask you, but if you could just tell the fans what it feels like to watch DRX absolutely destroy in play-ins.
Hey guys, Chronicler here. Personally, I was very happy to see how well DRX did throughout the play-in stage. I was kind of in line with what you were expecting, which was a second place. I actually predicted RNG to get out of the group in first place. So seeing them actually win in pretty classic DRX fashion with Deft and Zakabov really popping off, I thought was very, very cool. And I'm really excited to see what they can do by the end of the group stage and how well they will perform into the rest of the tournament.
I guess this can segue into talking about a few other things that we have on our docket, because the meta is where we need to go. And so talking about shifting metas and the fact that Mad now look okay, the segue was all right. However, my execution, not exactly the best. But let's get into it, gentlemen.
We got there.
The way the game has changed, and it's changed a lot. And we need to talk about this in the context of how it's going to affect our LCK teams. Very difficult for us to know exactly how it's going to affect all of the group stage at Worlds. But I have a feeling things are moving away from the bottom lane hyper carry. And so what does that mean for us?
Well, I think that it means Kai'Sa is kind of going to be one of those default champions that is the one that you get as AD carry when you prioritize it, because she's very versatile. She can work, with her Kraken Slayer builds, obviously, as a traditional AD carry in front to back, but also has the dive potential with a lot of different compositions if you want to go that way. And we have a pretty nice set of Kai'Sa players in the LCK. I think that Aphelios is another one that jumps out at you, and we have really good Aphelios players across the board. Guma UC, obviously, is a better champion for him than his Sivir has looked, than his Zeri has looked, I think, in terms of laning as well. So these champions kind of coming back up, the standard AD carries, it's never really there, the ones that get big changes, minus some AP nerfs to Kai'Sa. It's usually the other AD carries rotate in and out whenever the top AD carries get nerfed. We go back to Aphelios, Kai'Sa, etc. So I think that's good for us. I also think that going back to an Aatrox-oriented meta is really good for the LCK. Even Doran, who kind of weak link on Genji sometimes, likes to play Aatrox a lot, so it's good for him. Those are the two big takeaways for me so far.
Yeah, even just tying it into how DRX has looked, I think that, when people think about Def, they can obviously initially think about Jinx, Caitlyn, a couple of like big picks for this player, but I don't have the stats in front of me, but off the top of my head, like he played a lot of different AD carries, even in LCK Summer. The guy is very versatile. He's been around for years. Like he can pull out the old stuff if he needs to, right? So I'm very happy that like in this meta where we're seeing a lot of new things, even though everybody was playing only 2 champions basically for the entirety of summer. Now it's like, oh well, there are like 6 different AD carry champions. I think Deft is going to be ready for that, and Zeka as well. Like the mid lane meta is very interesting because towards the end of summer it was like, okay, either you get a Zir and you like try to dominate lane. And then we saw the slow increase of like Sylas and Akali, especially into picks like that, coming back in, but then also just getting stronger and stronger. So Zeka's going to feel really great in that meta. And just think about the other mids we have as well. Like you got Chovy, Faker, and Showmaker, right? So
Yeah.
These guys are all going to be very happy with that. The other lanes are going to be pretty interesting too. If it gets into a really bruisery top meta, I am a little bit worried for Doran. I think he's had a lot of time to practice, but can he like pick up the Fiora? Can he pick up the Camille? Can he pick up the Jax and like really try to carry from there? Will be interesting to see for me.
Yeah, I feel like Doran is one of those players, though. He defaults to playing carries
Akshan.
the majority of the time. Let's not talk about that. Akshan is like more like a marksman top counterpick option, okay? And so therefore, it's not to be compared to Camille, which
Like Teemo, right? Which was also played in play-ins.
Vayne.
I liked the Vayne a little bit more than the Teemo personally, although seeing ADD back on stage is very, very fun. Him and Jelly, oh man, a little bit sad that they didn't make it any further in the tournament. But still, great to see a lot of our players returning, at least representing other regions, so we can check them out one more time. But yes, getting back on topic, the mid lane meta is literally Zeka's champion pool from what we've seen so far. Like the most successful champions in mid lane are like Sylas, Azir, and Akali. And the only thing missing is Ahri, which is still playable, but not exactly the greatest. And if you think about that in the context of, like you say, all of our mid laners, I mean, everything is Chovy's main champion, so we don't really need to talk about him. But
Chovy Sylas is insane.
Yeah, Chovy Sylas.
You know who
is
Sylas
broken.
is also insane? Is Faker's. Faker's Sylas is actually insane. Like, my mind was blown by some of the plays that he had. And he's not really like the carry guy anymore, but when he
His
plays
four-man
Sylas,
Nah,
like he goes back in time or something. Like I don't know, he's crazy on that champ.
His 4-man Gnar ultimate on Sylas, I think it was at Worlds like 3 years ago, it's still one of the best individual plays I've seen on the international stage. Everyone pretty good at the old Sylas, but LeBlanc's still there as well. Like there are a lot of players finding some success, and so that means Showmaker well and truly taken care of.
How about Vex?
Yep, Vex is popping off, and if you look at Showmaker's solo queue over the last like year and a half, he's still playing a shitload of it. So it's like Ahri, Vex, I think LeBlanc or something like that are his top 3 still. Like he puts so many games into Vex, and Chovy as well. I think Chovy's had probably the best Vex game.
He is
in
our
LCK.
best Vex player.
But he's not best every player. Like,
What's really interesting to me is I think the mid meta hasn't really changed that much on this patch, except champions like Akali are a little bit more viable, and it was play-in, so we saw some Yone and stuff like that. But I think that mid is more important now because the AD carry meta has moved away from extreme hyper carry Sivir and Zeri. So the mid laners need to actually be able to position well and do damage because for a lot of the end of LCK and our Worlds qualifiers, it was kind of like, oh, you're mid, you're kind of softening them up a little bit, but then the AD carry is going to come in and finish everything off, and that's the end of that. So you could position yourself a little bit more aggressively, because if you died, it wouldn't matter, because if you got half the health bars while doing so, then Sivir comes in and cleans up, or Zeri comes in and cleans up. Now you actually have to kind of survive longer and play a team fight longer in general and play safer. And I think our mid laners have historically been extremely good at that. I think especially the Western teams are notorious for their mid laners trying to do that, but then getting caught, losing their mid laners at the beginning of fights and stuff like that. I think that's one thing that LCK is amazing at, is actually being a carry in a team fight as mid laners. Obviously things like Akali, Yone, stuff like this is a very different story, but Azir, Victor, I think we're very good at as a region. I think Victor will continue to return to this meta. So I do think the mid meta, outside of our incredible laning phase that we have in the LCK, is going to be really good for team fighting too.
No, I 100% agree. I think that it will work out quite well. But we need to talk about Genji, because Genji, I think, are going to suffer the most. You mentioned already Doran's struggling a little bit. Has struggled in the past a little bit. I think he's probably the least reliable as far as the players on Genji. Yeah. Just he has had the tendency to not perform to his potential. I mean, look at the other players situations
on his team.
That is a difficulty. Yeah. I mean, Peanut's another one though, because Peanut has had ups and downs. He's looked fantastic internationally, but he's also had some of these, fall off a cliff moments. There have been, a few of those times over the years on many different teams internationally.
Yeah, I mean, talking about Genji, I think we've kind of touched on Chovy a little bit. I think he's going to be probably the best mid at Worlds, I would say. I don't know if you guys agree with that. He's already...
I think so.
Yeah.
He's already, one of the top in LCK. A lot of people can put him at number 1, but I think that now that it's Silas, Akali, Yone, Vex, this guy is just going to pop off every single game. It's going to be hard to contain him. And then Peanut, the jungle role is pretty interesting. I don't think we learned a lot from DRX, to be quite honest, because it's kind of okay, pick me the tree and I will farm the things. And
the majority of their games,
be there.
DRX didn't even play their main jungler.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I don't think we learned a lot from LCK junglers, at least. I think we learned a lot from guys like Elyoya from Mad Lions and stuff like that. So I could definitely see Peanut just kind of just vibing in his spot, okay, I just help Chovy and try to help Doran not feed. We'll be pretty good. We'll be pretty good. And then Chovy dominates lane. Doran can dominate lane. I mean, the guy is pretty good. And then bottom lane is the most reliable lane we've seen at the LCK so far, and that's part of the reason why they won. Now the question is, can Ruler? Ruler's very good at those hyper carries, like the Zeris, like the Sivers. Can he go into kind of a changing meta and kind of figure it out? We've seen his Lucianami was really strong as well, obviously, but will he be ready for picking up the Tristana, picking up the Kai'Sa? I would assume so.
I mean, yeah. I think he'll be all right. I think the Kai'Sa Rakan was something that Genji found so much success on in the past. For example, when he was playing with Life.
I'm not super confident about Ruler's Kai'Sa, but he has a lot of time and he's had a lot of time to get it ready. And I mean, I say that, and it's maybe a 95 out of 100 instead of a 99 or 100 out of 100 for Ruler. So not a huge issue there. For Doran, going back to the discussion about what he brings to the team and what he may be he may cost his team, is that he's a very emotional player. We talk about this all the time, but when you play Sejuani top every game like he did for so long this year, if you go 0-2, you're still going to do CC from long range as Sejuani. You're going to be okay. But if you go 0-2 on Aatrox, for example, or go 0-2 on Fiora or Jax, then you're going to have big problems. And Doran, sometimes when he goes 0-2, he doubles down. He's like, I got to get gold. And then he tries to all in again. Then he goes 0-3. And then the enemy top laner who's playing a similar carry type topside or a split pushing topside gets ahead. So that's a concern. So they're going to have to keep him,
in check.
Yeah. Peanut also played so well in summer season, but specifically around getting Ruler fed. And he played bottom side almost exclusively because Chovy doesn't need help ever. And obviously top side was just tank versus tank 90% of the time, so there wasn't a lot of attention there. So Peanut will have to change his entire playstyle. I mean, he'll have to change the playstyle based on the meta now. It's not going to be Trundle every game or Poppy every game. So Peanut is a big question mark for me. I'm not worried about him, but I'm really curious to see how his version of this meta is, what he's thinking is the best way to play it. Because I think that's what Doran may lack for Gen G. I think Peanut will have to make up for big time, and I think he's definitely up to the task, but we don't know yet what his plan for that is going to be.
I actually think that the meta suits Peanut so well because Hecarim got giga buffed. He's always been a helicopter horse fan, and Graves is like almost permabanned at the moment. If you remember his time on LGD, like he literally solo carried games. Like that was how he dragged that team to the World Championship when he was over there in China. And so I think that Peanut's certainly in a great spot meta-wise to be successful. And I'm glad that you bring that up because you add the fact that like Chovy is probably in heaven with the champions that he can play right now. Like getting lane pressure in mid is going to be almost guaranteed. Then you can choose to play for bot lane or top lane, depending on what ruler is going to be playing. Because you can still play through bot side. It just depends what you're going to get and what that means for you, because these Herald fights have been relatively important, and there's been a lot of bruises in volatile matchups that need help, or at least to like counter gank assistance and stuff like that.
What about T1 though?
Okay, this is the one. This is the one that gets interesting.
Yeah.
Genji's pretty easy, but okay.
The first thing I want to say about T1 is I think the player who is negatively impacted by this meta the most is Owner. Actually, I don't think that it is a. I don't think it is a hands jungle meta. I think it is a brain jungle meta, and I think we're going to be seeing because Owner played around bottom side like I was talking about with Peanut earlier. But it was kind of like, that's what you do. This is the meta, and it's very basic, and it's very obvious, and he played it really well. And in early duels and skirmishes, he played extremely well on champions like Lee Sin, where he can show his mechanical prowess. But can you guys even, like... Remember when he played Morgana in the finals, and we were like, okay, he doesn't really know what he's doing there, and, like, he can't actually express his skills. I'm trying to imagine Owner playing Maokai, and I just can't do it. I can't see it. Like, I can't...
Yeah.
Like, it is not his play style. It's not his style of champion. You put him on the aggressive bruisers, the Xin Zhao. You put him on Lee Sin. Even Trundle, you know, he does pretty well with that. But you put him on junglers like the Maokai, and, you know, or you have to make more complex decisions now because you're, like you were saying, Atlas, are you playing around bottom side? Are you playing around top side? What's your draft looking like? T1's drafting has looked suspect. They have the new quote-unquote Bengi coach coming in for this, so maybe things will be fixed a little bit, but I am worried about what Owner is going to do because I think he really needs to think about the game more in a macro sense and less of a micro sense. I'm not saying he's a bad macro jungler, but compared to some of the opponents he will face in this group stage and potentially in round of 8, I do wonder how he will look.
I have one question, though, because now that we move past the LCK Finals patch, which I actually also thought was bad for Owner, because he's not a Poppy player. And so they then have to ban Poppy every single game. They lose a ban slot and they're playing against Gen G. That's basically why they lost in a lot of ways. But now that they don't need to worry about that as much, doesn't that sort of benefit him? You can still play some Lee Sin, even though he's not great. Like, Xin Zhao is still in a pretty good spot.
Viego is still pretty good, too. Like, he can play Viego. Like, those are champs he has to kind of play and focus on, and I do agree that now that they're not worried about Poppy every game, and his Trundle, like I said, he was okay on it, but he wasn't amazing on it. That does allow him to have a little bit more flexibility in jungle. They could pick for him later on in the draft because there's still a lot he can play. But I think he takes kind of a hit in this meta, not necessarily as much because of the jungle pool, but because of how less binary the game is. Like, he has to think a lot more. He has to think about a lot more vertical jungling, a lot more... Am I going topside here? Am I helping Faker out? Am I helping out Gumayusi and Keria?
Yeah, I think that the meta is definitely a big question mark for T1. I think they have an opportunity because they are good enough, especially like compared to the group stage teams. Like we're talking about like their finals against Gen G, but that was Gen G as well because it wasn't just like the Poppy. It was like, oh, we can't play Yuumi, which is god tier broken, so we have to ban that, and we can't leave that open. We can't play it, so Gen G doesn't have to ban it. And stuff like this. But like I think they have an opportunity, like Faker, I think, as well, as I was mentioning before. I think he's going to be very comfortable in this meta as well. So maybe they just play like really aggressive topside and just try to like actually continue playing with Oneron as strong champs, and they're like, okay, we've got Zeus and Faker that can play aggressive stuff. You get like an Aatrox, you get like a Silas in mid, and then, it's going to be very, very aggressive, very sinful if you want to look at it in that light. But I think they can definitely body a lot of teams just through hand stiff and stuff like that. Now, it does raise questions about how far they can go in the tournament with that play style. So it is a little bit of a risk for that team, I think. Like where if you put all your eggs in one basket and you're like, okay, we can do this kind of style, maybe it'll work against the the C9s in their group or like the Fnatic or even the EDG. But how's it going to work when they later face off against JDG, Top Esports, Gen G again? They can't just body these teams. So that is a little bit of a question mark. I feel like it could work out very well for them because I think we have it written down here that Beryl was talking about how like the play-ins meta and the groups meta is always different as well. So who knows? Maybe they can kind of like reinvent the wheel a little bit. Well, maybe go back to the old wheel and just continue putting Owner on Viego, put him on anything aggressive really like Elise in, and just try to continue with that.
Yeah, I wonder which is going to be the Amumu of this World Championship.
I think we have to talk about Zeus too going into this.
Yeah, we do.
Because
Nara is a champion again.
Zeus looked really good on Renekton. His Aatrox was looking pretty good towards the end when we suddenly, the last patch for the LCK was a little bit more Renekton, a little bit more Aatrox. Mm-hmm. He has had some really weird games on Renekton where he builds weird items and just completely falls off. But I think overall, like on a normal day, he's a really good Renekton player, really good Aatrox player. Renekton definitely not as meta, obviously, going into Worlds so far, but still same vein of champions. His Fiora is still kind of a question mark for us. His Jack's still kind of a question mark for us, but the guy has proven that he is an insanely mechanical player, and I think if he has the right leadership around him, if Faker is telling him what to do, if the coaching staff is preparing really well, he is going to be an absolute god at this tournament, I think, and he's one of the carry top laners for the LCK. Like you talk about Doran and Kingan, you're like a little bit inconsistent. Like Kingan's probably not going to mess up. Like he's kind of the middle one. He's the neutral one. Doran, he's very wildly inconsistent, so he could be the strong side. He could be the weak side for your team. It depends on the game. Mm-hmm. But I feel like Zeus is always going to be a strong point for T1 consistently here, no matter what. I feel really confident that he's going to look good here. For Damwon, Nuguri, hard to say at this point in time, but I think that Zeus is something that a lot of teams may overlook because of his weak performances at the end of LCK, despite actually overall being an insanely mechanical player. So teams might underestimate it.
Potentially. I mean, I'm personally just... I need to see 369 versus Zeus. I just cannot wait for that matchup. I think they are probably like the two battling for best top lane in the tournament right now, possibly even best players in the tournament. Like Zeus just, like you say, it's just a mechanical god. That's why I didn't mention him that much in T1, because you just assume that
it's one kind of a given.
It's like when you talk
like
about Gen G, like
Chovy.
Obviously they will have mid lane pressure.
Yeah.
In T1's case, obviously they will have top lane pressure.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll also just win the game through
top lane is just very interesting though, because there is a bit of whiplash that is going on with that. Like we had spring where Zeus looked like a god, and he looked like a god in summer as well until the very end. But we went from pretty much only tanks and a little bit of like Gnar and other stuff thrown in there to okay, now we're only bruisers. I hope you guys have hands now that you took a season off and basically just sat there and played Ornn, at least in the LCK, I should say. But yeah, I think that Zeus is going to be totally fine. I think it'll be a lot like Chovy. Like as long as his mental state is there, because he still is a relatively young player. Like as long as he's on his game, he should be having a really fun time. Because I mean,
he's so good.
We know he'll be able to play the Fiora, the Jax. As much as I don't want to see too much Jax.
You are a big Jax hater.
I hate Jax so much. I think it's bad. Without Yuumi, that is. But Yuumi never gets through. So. Yeah, I think he'll be totally fine. What about the bottom lane, though? Guma and Keria?
I think Keria is back in a really great spot because he can play engaged supports again, but we still need to see whether Gumushi is...
That's a wait and see,
okay,
I think.
yeah.
That's for me like a little bit of a wait and see because Guma, he looked really good on two champions, they were Kalista and they were Draven. Those are the two champions that he could dominate lane in. But you put him on the Zeri, the Sivir, or even in some cases like Kai'Sa, Aphelios, he was looking very weak in the laning phase in the last meta, during LCK Summer, I should say, the last season. I say weak, but compared to like the rest of our top four, like Deft was better than him, right? Ruler was clearly better than him, so and Duckdom was on average, I think, better than him at the end. So it's weird because he was a player who was so heralded to be the next big thing, and he won out over Teddy in that role, which was an extremely competitive role. It's crazy to think that both these players played on the same team. It's like still mind-blowing to me. Just a year ago that these guys were competing for the same spot. He won out, but after he got the position, like after it was his spot, he's just been kind of middling, and it's not about like the meta. I think it's about a headspace for him and like where his mentality's at. So if he's in a good place and he's looking good in those first few games, I think then we're like, okay, like it's a good meta for him because Carry has engaged supports. He can play Thresh again a little bit. Lots of Leona. All right, maybe this works out well. But I think it's one of those things that we can't realistically predict until we see it happen, because it does feel like it's not a stylistic thing. It's not a champion pool issue. It's just a how is Guma's form looking kind of issue.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes there is some coordination being missed there on the bottom side of late, right? Because we were touting this team as this bottom lane is the best in the world moving into MSI. And then that ever since that point, it's sort of been off a cliff. We do need to talk about Damwon Kia, though. And I think that patch-wise, it's looking pretty good for this team. Like, you look at Aatrox Renekton meta top lane, or like Aatrox Jax meta is even better. Camille, massive. Like, it's Nuggery's old champion pool, bar Jax, that's just been brought back. So he's psyched. So if you look at like Canyon's most successful champions of all time,
Graves,
they are that is the jungle pool like right now, and even Karthus is in a great spot at the moment as well. Like he can play some fiddlesticks. Lilia is back as well. Like what the actual is happening? Like Canyon, it's just Canyon's meta. He won Worlds on a meta like this, and he's feeling very good about it. Showmaker as well. We mentioned already that LeBlanc's in an okay position. Vex as well is another one of Showmaker's big picks that has found so much success. Shout out to Yaharong. He looked phenomenal on the champion. Good old Grace. But I think that this team is looking real set up. And it's about whether Duckdom and Kellen can settle back into more of that facilitative role on the bottom side, which I think that they should be able to do.
I think so too. It's also Aphelios is really strong right now still. I think he's one of those picks that like once all the other AD carries are banned, you're like, okay, we got Kai'Sa, we got Aphelios. Like that's a common matchup you end up seeing. So it's really good for Duckdom. But I think Canyon has always been, even with the massive roster changes to Damwon Kia, Canyon has been the reason why this team has always looked good overall internationally. It's a great meta for him, so I think he makes Showmaker look better. It's a great meta for Canyon, but I think he makes Canyon look better. Or rather, for Nuggery, yeah. For Nuggery, I think he makes Nuggery look better. And, for Duckdom and Kellen, as a result, I think a lot of pressure will be off of them, so they will naturally be able to play that facilitative role like you were talking about. I'm suddenly like angelic here as the lights come on. But I think Damwon, I've been saying this all year. It's like, okay, Damwon is a flexible team in terms of the meta. They tried a lot of stuff in summer. They weren't like locked into one playstyle. They were playing the Karthus. They were experimenting a lot. And I kept saying, well, when it comes to Worlds, if they make it there, like they're going to be ahead of the curve too, because they probably already were practicing Maokai, as a flex pick. They probably were already preparing for this meta extremely well. They're already moving away from Sivir and from Zeri. So I think this is a very smart team. It's a great meta for Canyon. And I think Damwon Kia will surprise a lot of LCK fans, I think, who are a little bit down on them. I think for the fans internationally, they'll be like, oh, that's the Damwon I know, because they did very well internationally. But I think, for LCK fans who are kind of like, it's a tough group, I think it will be. And I think JDG is my favorite to get out of that group in first place. But I think Damwon will look really good. I think they'll be potentially, as the meta evolves, even stronger in quarters.
Damwon are just a really scary dark horse team. Like, you guys are really hitting it on the head, and I think that even the narrative part of it, like the entirety of this year of LCK, if you think about it, it's been Gen G T1 again, like back again. Here we are for spring, for summer. once again, T1 did it, Genji did it. Where's Damwon? They've been through changes. Nuguri came back and all this weird stuff. They have a new bottom lane. Barrel's not there anymore. Like, where's their leadership? Can they make it happen? It's been kind of a weird meta for Canyon all year. I think that now we're finally getting a good Canyon meta. It's a good Showmaker meta as well. We talked about this before. Like, it's great for all our mids. As we saw with Zeka, he was kind of like the fourth pin in a row.
Yeah.
But Showmaker is insane on all these champions as well. Like, he has some of the best hands out of all of them. So it's just such a scary dark horse team. Like, they're third place from LCK, very quietly, coming on in. Everybody's talking about, even abroad, talking about T1, talking about Genji, how they're the new big hotness, and all of a sudden DK's gonna come in and they're gonna be like, "Hey guys, remember us? Like, remember 2020?" And maybe, I think it was Chronicler who put like 10% Dalmon win worlds or something, like his 90-50-10. It might have been that, or maybe it was just about play-ins. But either way, like, he's talked to me before where he's like, maybe Damwon just win the whole thing. Like, could be like the we were just talking about this before the show as well. Like, maybe Suning gets through it, like, as the third seed. Maybe this is Damwon's year. Like, everybody expected Genji, and then all of a sudden Damwon comes in. The meta is really on point as long as like the players are ready and they can play well. I think they have a really good chance.
Back again, Peanut. Once more, undefeated in the group stage. They get to the knockout stage and they're like, "Oh, we're against Damwon? Easy." 3-zip, then Damwon wins Worlds and Peanut has to suffer through that again, like he did on Longzhu.
It could happen.
Oh my god. Or it was Kingzone at the time, because that was the year that they just changed. So, oh my god, no, that timeline cannot exist. Oh, I feel dirty.
Damwon are really scary.
Yeah, they are.
Very scary.
I feel like everything that we've all felt about Damwon, like, might finally come to like a real head here. Like, it might actually come to like all of the build-up is about to hit a climax for Damwon fans, because there's just too many things that look really good for them. And I think Canyon is the most important, most pivotal part of this. And I just want to remind everyone, this was the guy who won Worlds in 2020 and was Worlds MVP. Everyone was saying he is undisputedly the best jungle player in the world. And this year, I think part of why he has looked weaker, and he was the most criticized member, I think, of Damwon outside of Nuguri, obviously, who everyone was like, "Oh, Nuguri's back, he's going to be amazing," and then he didn't live up to expectations. But a lot of people were like, "Man, is Canyon even a top 5 jungler right now through a lot of the season?" But I think it's because the meta, I don't want to say it wasn't his meta, but he was like, "No, I'm actually going to play Kiana. Like, I'm actually going to play Karthus. I'm gonna experiment with a lot of stuff." I think he was not as focused on a smaller pool, so looked weaker as a result. But he was honing all these other skills and learning about the games in a wider way than before, which I think is why he's one of the smartest junglers in the world. So I look forward to seeing what he's going to play. I want to see him on Maokai. I want to see him on Karthus. I want to see him on Lee Sin, and obviously Graves. I want to see him on the whole package, and I think that's what he's going to show us.
It's going to be really difficult to ban against them, because especially if Nuguri proves that he can like dominate with some kind of strong side top or like split push kind of top, like a Fiora or Camille. Like, we obviously know his Camille is insane, but he needs to show that he can play it again. If he can do that, then like, what do you ban against this team? It's just so difficult, because I think Canyon is obviously going to prove that he can pull out all sorts of insane stuff, but also is going to be like 10 out of 10 on at least 3 meta picks, which are like Graves, Hecarim, and
Lilia, probably.
Lilia, or like even the Trundle, like, he can pull that out easily. He can play Sejuani. I don't think he should, because I think he will have a bigger impact on other champs. But like, how do you play against this when also like Sylas, Akali are kind of like in this weird spot where they're like on the cusp of being not permaban, but it's like against some teams you just have to ban it, and I think Showmaker can easily make that like somewhat permaban against Damwon. So I mean, you don't have 6 bans, so like, what are you gonna do?
You need like 11.
Team?
You need like 11 bans against this team, because the thing that Lilia being decent brings is Showmaker's crazy
Yone.
melee champion pool. Like, it's Yone, but it's
Yasuo.
also Aatrox flex mid. It's Renekton mid. Like,
Renekton
Renekton
Talia.
mid.
Talia's in the meta as well.
Yeah,
Didn't
exactly,
even talk
like-
about that. That was permaban against Dom on this
Literally.
entire season.
Yeah,
Like,
and one of Canyon's
Oh,
best
man.
picks. Oh my
It's
god.
still heavily banned so far. It's basically 3 out of 10 games.
There are a lot
in
of great
Worlds so far.
Talia players.
Yeah.
Like I think it was Niski that was playing extremely well on the pick also. So yeah, Talia still looking very, very strong. Yeah, I think the way we're talking, it's kind of like maybe Damon's actually just going all the way based on what we've seen.
scariest
in the
dark
play-ins
horse
meta.
in a while.
No, absolutely.
Scariest
What they
in a
need to
while.
do is fix up their coordination problems, right? You mentioned Beryl leaving. I think that was a big voice in the team whenever they were in comms. Well, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we were talking about this, but that's the only thing that I want to see properly fixed. And as soon as if that gets fixed, then this team is definitely in contention. Who's making those calls and stuff like that? We're yet to find out. Okay, we've spoken a lot about how we think League of Legends is going to be played in the group stage. Chronicler, what do you think? You've had on-the-field testing done with play-ins. What do you think is going to happen in the group stage, especially for our LCK teams?
So for group stage, I am actually from the future, so I have a little bit more intel. But coming into the group stage, I'll give what were my thoughts initially, and then I'm going to cheat a little bit and use some future knowledge to kind of give my thoughts on what we've seen so far, because I'm recording this after the first day of the group stage. So my thoughts were Genji's going to smash everyone. I don't think that the meta should be a problem for them. And as long as they can get a good meta read, I really trust a lot of the plays. So no matter what, T1, I kind of following with you guys. I'm not too, or I wasn't rather too sure whether or not they would be able to kind of shake off. I think some of the rust that we've seen, it's not like they were ever bad, but with T1, there's always really high expectations, especially after the spring that they've had. And the cohesion just didn't look that great. And then, yeah, Damwon was my 10% pick to win Worlds. I also put them in my crystal ball, which I think was a really big risk, but I kind of wanted to just take a big gamble with that. Genji seemed like a no-brainer, but no-brainers don't always come true. So overall, I thought, DRX probably somehow still make it out of groups, even though I don't think they should. I think that team has too many weaknesses, but we'll see how that happens outside of the context of the LCK. And then I paused for a little bit to make it easy. If you do want to cut this out, Ian, but I also do some future knowledge because I thought it'd be funny. So with what I've seen today in groups, T1 look cracked. And if they can do it against ADG, they should be good doing that to any team that isn't top esports or JDG, because they looked really, really good individually, which I thought was really cool. I think that draft was very high stakes, high reward, paid off. Genji had a pretty subpar game. I think a lot of credit to RNG for being as good as they were, while simultaneously, I don't think Genji will drop like that again. If they drop games against Oyster or against 100 Thieves, then I get really worried, but I think one best of one drop isn't the end of the world as long as they can adapt. Damwon Kia, we thought the meta might be moving in that direction, and so far looks like that's accurate. So very excited to see what the rest of the tournament is going to bring for the LCK. But based on today, I'm feeling pretty excited.
Okay, it is now time for brass tacks, gentlemen. Let's get down to it. You need to put your money where your mouth is, and not necessarily money, just internet bucks. Prediction time. Group stage. Give me your pick'ems. What are they? Top two for each group. For me, it's like super cut and dry and real easy.
We
might
need
all
to
just agree.
address the gap in the room.
Did you appreciate that game of long jump that they were doing?
That was very nice.
The accurate representation
thinking that a lot,
of how the game goes. By the way,
Um,
this is the long jump that's actually real. By the way, if you could just, these are two pieces of paper for Wolf. These two represent the LPL and the LCK. If you could just put them together and hold them up there. And all of this paper here is everyone else. If you could just hold them over there. That's the gap, guys.
mind the gap when you're in New York
Maybe,
City.
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe this is like the GAM.
Yeah, this is the GAM.
There's a
We've
gap
got the
and there's a
GAM. We
gap.
can put the GAM in here. Yeah. There we go. We got the gap and the GAM.
You know what they say in the New York subways? They say mind the gap.
They do. They say that in London
And
too.
we have the group stage in New York, and I think that's the biggest question mark and the biggest thing on everybody's minds. Like, are we just going to have 8 teams from LPL and LCK, 4 each? And
I think that's the smart prediction.
even before we talk about each individual group, like that's the gap that needs to be called out. It's like, is this the year that we get this? I think it's pretty likely. I don't, what team, like we talked about the GAM in the middle, like what team is going to do it if not GAM? Like, I don't know.
I don't think it's gonna be Flying Oyster, unfortunately. Like if Flying Oyster was in a different group, we could be like, maybe. Like if Dom1 or T1 really mess up, but like that's the
like,
group
which
with
group?
Genji and
I have
RNG.
had-
So
I've had a lot of people ask me, do you think Rogue can beat DRX and get out second in Group C?
What?
I
Rogue is lost.
don't see it.
that sounds like that
because-
person's existential question. Like they're like, please validate me.
Yeah.
No.
Because Rogue, while they did look strong at times in the LEC, they did have some big setbacks in the playoffs as well. And I think their group is also really strong. Like DRX
I think that's the group of death.
is really strong as well. GAM is really strong, and Top is one of our finals contenders. So
Yeah.
good luck, I guess.
I'll like go like a little bit more concisely and just say who I think is gonna win, and maybe why, or if it's self-explanatory, maybe why not. Maybe I won't say why. I think for Group A, Fnatic could be a potential threat if T1 totally bomb, and it's not their meta, or there's too many problems with the new coaching staff or something like that. But I expect probably EDG gets out in first, T1 gets out in second. I think T1 might be a stronger team than EDG at the end, but I think for groups, I don't want to predict that because I just don't trust T1 yet. For Group B, I'm feeling like it's going to be JDG first, Dom1 second. Again, similarly, I think Dom1 could eventually become a better team than JDG, but for what those two teams looked like at the end of their respective regions, I think JDG looked like the better team. Top and DRX. Top esports first, DRX second. GAM could be a wild dark horse. Like it's a wild dark horse. It's like a dark horse, but also very wild.
It's a Brumby.
Untamed.
I think there's no way Rogue gets out of Group C. Like 0% chance. Sorry, Rogue fans. Sorry, Malrang. But I think TES probably stronger than DRX. I think DRX could go out in the third if GAM is looking way better than I expect, and DRX kind of some of those macro issues we saw in play-ins rear their ugly head again. But Group D, I think, is also pretty obviously Genji and RNG. RNG did look kind of weak in play-ins, but as you were mentioning, Atlas, earlier, like, it doesn't feel like they really actually got it off the ground yet. They haven't really taken the meta very seriously. They're playing old comfort picks and just trying to hide strategies. So I think it's pretty fair to assume Genji and RNG get out. But I think there's no world in which Genji does not get out in first place. Like, we might even see a world where Genji do not drop a single game in that group.
And then they lose to Dom1 in the knockout stage. No, Peanut, no! Wolf, stop saying it!
Oh, no.
Oh, God. But yeah, I think I 100% agree. I actually think that I would have had the same top two in each group.
I'll go ahead and I'll give T1 a little bit of a nudge. I think they'll come out strong and they might falter later. Would be my slight change up on that. Like,
so
maybe
T1 first.
Maybe T1 get first, CDG second, and then maybe T1 struggle a little bit when it comes to knockouts. But I think group stage they'll probably perform pretty well. I think they can body a lot of teams, even EDG. I think they can come out and just kind of make bottom lane irrelevant and say, good luck, Viper. Do your thing.
I think
whatever.
that's the strat.
We're just gonna kill your top side of the map and win. So that's like really the one change. We talked about how strong DK can be. So again, sorry LEC fans, but I don't think G2 will have much of a chance either. So it's pretty rough. That's a rough group for G2 to get in, because if it were a different group, like if it were Group D or like even Group C, like I could pick G2 over DRX, like I could do that, but I can't pick them over DK. So, that's the one team that kind of sticks out to me where I'm like, ooh, kind of a rough draw there, G2, but it happens. Getting put in GDG's group is just kind of a death sentence, and then with Damwon potentially being so strong. So yeah, I mean the other groups, like Group C is a little bit of a toss-up. It's kind of like a group of death because it's top esports, and then the 3 other teams, who knows, like they are going to actually battle to the death. So maybe Rogue do get out, but I would say it's kind of unlikely. Like I would favor towards GAM and DRX as well, but I would give DRX a bit of a leg up on GAM as well. I think that's I think they'll make it through. I think they're very, very well prepared for this tournament. So, and then Group D is really obvious.
Group D is
not too much to.
That one's real.
Unless RNG just really are not a good team, and we're like, oh yeah, maybe they just were kind of messing around in plans, but then actually they're a weak team, and then maybe Flying Oyster. But I mean, Flying Oyster's not a strong opponent. If you put G2 in this group, like I might be like, oh, G2, like you were saying, Valdes, like maybe they could beat RNG, but it's kind of awkward because I think the weakest Chinese team, the weakest LPL team, is in a group where they're just destined to get second because they have 2 otherwise very weak opponents here. So
yeah, I actually think that Group B and Group C are the interesting ones. I think, like you say, like Group D, that's donezo. I agree with you, Valdes. I think T1 managed to beat EDG last year. I think they should be able to do it again in the group stage. But Group B, yeah, I think on paper, Damwon Kia should be great. But I've bet like for Damwon Kia in the past, and I've been burnt for it.
Yeah.
When I expect them to be good. As soon as I expect them to be good, they suck. As soon as I don't expect them to be good, Damwon look amazing. Take, regional qualifier, for example. Playoffs, for example. They looked a lot better than expected. G2 might also surprise us here because they're a team that also, I think, suffered a little bit at the hands of the meta. I think Rogue definitely overperformed massively in that final. Was a whole lot of fun to watch. But I also thought that Caps played like a god. And I think that the meta has only developed further towards facilitating mid lane carries. And I think a little bit less onus is on the bottom lane, which I think benefits G2 a lot, with Broken Blade and Caps being big carries for the team. So there's a bit of EU hopium there, but a little bit. I think I'm never going to bet that, right? Like I'm never going to predict it. It's still just JDG Damwon. Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think what DRX looking so good has done is given us a little bit of assurance that this sort of prediction kind of makes sense. I think RNG looking like they're still hibernating before the group stage as well as another one. But DRX they came out swinging. They looked really, really good. Mm-hmm. And that only means that the teams that are ahead of them in the standings, and also by like not a large margin, but an okay margin, I think. Like our top 3 were better than the bottom 3, and they were the ones that were sort of in contention, KT, Sandbox, and DRX, of course. Mm-hmm. It was a very competitive season of League of Legends this summer in the LCK. I think that it's really set us up well for Worlds this time around. So I'm almost like, because we got 4 teams out of groups last year, this year should be free. I think is kind of how it goes.
I think so too. The question is, how does the seeding go? Because
we need first seed in every group. No,
I'm like, do we want Korea versus Korea to guarantee a top 4, or do we want just Korea versus China across the board so we get it all top 4 Korea if we win all of them?
Oh crap! So we actually no, we just need to make sure that we have all second seed or all first seed. You have to choose a seed and be that.
That means that Damwon needs to be JDG and DRX need to be top esports. So I don't think that's gonna happen.
Well, can Gen.G lose to RNG a few times? No. Just sprinkle that in there. They could.
I don't think they're physically capable of that.
If DRX beats top esports, that's it, guys. We're getting a top 4 LCK.
Bring out the champagne already.
LCK winter semifinals.
I'm looking forward to the rematch of the LCK playoffs as we move further into the knockout stage. Yeah. I don't think it's going to go that way. I think that
Isn't
the
it
LPL 's
possible
still
we get
extremely
Genji
strong.
T1 in quarters?
Yes.
Is it
If EDG beats
impossible?
T1 and
Is it
Genji,
possible?
and
It is
Genji
possible.
gets
First and second seed, and then it just
yeah.
kind of happens that way.
It depends how it's drawn, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it can be. I think it's based on like who was in groups with who and stuff like that, sort of, when it's like placed in. But like my brain sort of explodes when you get into the rules of who's allowed to go into which.
I think in knockouts it's more straightforward. I think it's just first seeds and second seeds, and
Yeah, but it is.
It's just
I think
kind
it
of-
is randomly
But you
drawn.
can't have them
Random.
from you can't have first and second seed from the same group drawn into
Well,
a best of 5.
yeah.
That's the only.
So it's
thing.
basically
yeah,
50-50,
You could
yeah.
have Genji T1 in a semi.
It does. It is. Let me look at one more thing before we close this out. Like, is it likely that we have like 2 Korea versus Korea in the?
It might be
It
Civil
would,
War
it would
again.
require Damwon to get first, because I don't think DRX are beating
Yeah,
top
yeah,
ever.
yeah,
like
yeah.
Damwon would have to outperform GDG, which
I
mean,
hope that doesn't happen.
it
but-
could happen, but that could also mean, as we're kind of alluding to, it could be like Genji T1, Damwon DRX, and then you've got like JDG Top Esports.
It might be a good thing. Like, get rid of the Chinese teams and buy the Chinese teams on the other side.
RNG, like that's our quarters. No way, man. That would be. I don't want that to happen.
I hope that doesn't happen just for the
I don't want
fans
that
as
to
well.
happen.
That's kind
Yeah.
of like, why are we watching 2 domestic leagues at Worlds?
Yeah.
I mean, it'll be like that'd be kind of the 2020 thing, right? Where it was like Fnatic and G2, and then like Civil Wars on either side.
Yeah.
And then Fnatic and G2 just like in the middle of this fight between.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a bit sad how that one was drawn. So fingers crossed, that's not how it's going to go. That'll do it from us, though. Thank you so much for watching our World's Interim episode of the Pog State. Hopefully we're going to be back with one more before the ultimate conclusion of the World Championship. But thank you so much for watching once again, and we'll see you next time.